welcome back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I'm your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Jackson Keller.
And this week, I moved. And I want to preface this whole episode by saying that in case there's any sort of like weird audio things going on, because I am still working it out. And like, if there's any sort of weird noises happening in the background, I apologize. Let me know. I will do my best to fix it. I try and catch everything in post-editing, but in case I don't, let me know, and I'm sorry. Just bear with us. Next week should be better if this week isn't already perfect. And you know what? Everything we do is perfect, so you never know.
Well, viewers, I can tell you that I still live in the same mold-encrusted den that I have ever since we started the podcast, so I can promise you the same level of echoing low-quality audio that you always get from me. Reliably terrible.
Listen, that we did figure out that you had your gain up really high like 2 weeks ago, so like there should be an improvement there anyway.
But yeah, so we've got a movie this week, we sure do, about Tom Cruise, the Flab Master, and his awkward running.
Oh my god, yeah, we watched Mission Impossible Fallout, and like our big takeaway is that Tom Cruise runs like a dope. Like, I feel like he should be like windmilling his arms as he runs, and it would be like the perfect watching your friend in second grade Naruto run type of run, and it's wonderful.
This is a true story. That in second grade, I had a friend who ran around the playground like Sonic the Hedgehog. And in order to be cool, I decided to emulate him. So we both started running like Sonic, and we were cool. Much cooler than Tom Cruise, multi-million-dollar action star, who has built an entire career on running. And in fact, if this Entertainment Weekly article is to be believed, most of his highest-rated movies involve him running a lot.
And yet, here we are.
And yet, here we are. Mission Impossible Fallout New Vegas.
Which, yeah, I mean, despite the sudden weird post-apocalyptic, and I mean, you know, like, you patrol the Mojave, you wish for a nuclear winter, but it was pretty good.
Mission Impossible Fallout was exactly as good as I expected it to be, which was high quality, but extremely forgettable. Because this is exactly what I got out of Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, the only other movie in the franchise that I have seen. And so forgettable was Mission Impossible Rogue Nation that I had to go to Wikipedia to look up which Mission Impossible I had seen. And I remembered, not because of the content of the film, but because I remembered watching it in the theater in college. And Ghost Protocol came out when I was in high school, so therefore it couldn't have been Ghost Protocol. This became a problem because there are several elements of Mission Impossible Rogue Nation that ended up being important and come back like a sequel generally does. Not to the point where I was confused on what was going on, because you can figure it out from context, but I didn't know which characters were supposed to return, which ones I hadn't seen before, except, of course, for Henry Cavill and the mustache that ruined Justice League.
And it was so worth it, because Henry Cavill is a hunk in this movie, and that mustache helps quite a bit.
Henry Cavill is great, and I would like to be on the record as having believed in him all along, despite him being bad in Man of Steel. I think that we could safely say that he is a talented man with a great presence who just needs the right director, of which he did not have in the DC Extended Universe.
I could see him being like a decent Superman, honestly.
He was a decent Superman in Justice League, I thought.
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah. So yeah, this movie was pretty much what I expected it to be. It was a little long. 2.5 hours was too long for this kind of thing, but I didn't really feel it until the end.
It went by pretty fast. Like,
this definitely felt shorter than some of the 1.5 hour movies that we've seen. Cough, cough, Hurricane Heist, cough, cough.
I have never actually looked up the running time for Hurricane Heist, and I refuse to, because whatever it is, it's not long enough. But yeah, no, as I said, I really liked Mission Impossible Fallout. Like Jackson, I've only seen one of these previously. I saw Ghost Protocol, 6 years ago at this point. Same boat in that I didn't actually remember which one I saw. I had to look up what one it was on Wikipedia, and the only thing I remembered about it was that he scaled the Burj Khalifa. So thank God that that's apparently a big enough plot point that they included it in the Wikipedia article. But yeah, like I also ended up more than a little confused at points, just because like they threw characters at us that like you're clearly supposed to recognize if you'd watched the other movies. But like I remember watching Ghost Protocol and not thinking and never thinking like, wow, I don't know what's going on. I don't know any of the backstory, any of the stuff. Like most of these Mission Impossible movies end up being pretty well self-contained and like more spiritual successors than true sequels, whereas this one felt more like a true sequel as they throw some characters at us and whatnot. And like, yeah, as Jackson said, the context and content I understood, but a lot of the characters I got very quickly confused about, especially when, everyone's like all changing like their hair and face and whatnot, and then like, here's a woman and then here's a different woman. But if you haven't watched the last couple, you're like, is that the same woman? I don't really know.
So in this particular instance, I'm glad you brought up the same two women looking the same, because it's with like the agent lady and Tom Cruise's wife, and they're both kind of similar, like brunette women, and this is notable to me that I got them confused again, because I had this exact same problem in Mission Impossible Rogue Nation and still could not differentiate between them despite having seen that movie. So yeah, with those expectations, I was actually quite terrified, having seen this only yesterday, that by the time I came down to record this, I would not have remembered enough of it in order to say anything of value. Fortunately, that didn't end up being the case, so it lasted at least an evening in my brain, which is more than I can say for a lot of movies that we've watched recently.
Yeah, no, it's been like I remember the highlights of it. I remember some parts that I do want to talk about. I remember some moments that I'm like, wow, that was actually really cool. That was really clever. I remember some moments that actually held a decent bit of tension, which I definitely want to talk about this, because we've ragged on series and whatnot for not being able to really generate tension, and this movie manages to do so quite nicely. Yeah, like it was good. Like it's got like an 86 on Metacritic, and that feels just about perfect. There's nothing I can really say about it where I'm like, wow, what a bad movie. Here's a moment about it that was really bad. They're all like little things. Like, it was a little long, and I'm not really going to remember much of it, but like, it was a perfect example of just a summer, get some popcorn and eat it and watch a movie.
This is the kind of movie where if someone asked me if they should see it, my response would be, yeah, sure. Like, I'm not going to go run out and tell everyone that it's a must-see, but if someone wants to see it, I think they should, because they'll probably have a good time.
If you're looking for something to do, like, you're just like, hey, I got 3 hours to kill, I want to go see a movie, get some popcorn. My theater apparently offers a Twinkie strawberry salad, and yes, that was exactly, fried Twinkie strawberry salad, and that's what they called it. Go for this one over like Ant-Man and the Wasp, because like Ant-Man and the Wasp was fine, but this was actually a little bit better. Like I enjoyed myself more with it. Ant-Man and the Wasp I felt was a little predictable, which not necessarily a bad thing, but like this one kind of held its twists and turns better, and the trailer doesn't tell you everything you need to know about the movie, which is awesome.
There's one last thing I want to say before we dive into the nitty-gritty, the big picture with spoilers and shit, is that if I've been a little bit out of the loop as far as like movie news and stuff, because I've been limiting my Twitter usage. Great decision, by the way. I highly recommend it to everyone. But if you had seen that the movie has like a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, and people are calling it like the next Fury Road, as Sean informed me that people are.
No.
Do not come in with those expectations. You will be disappointed. The movie is good. It is not transcendent. It is the perfect example of what Rotten Tomatoes is. It's an indicator of how safe a bet you are going to like a movie, how likable a movie is, because it only calculates based off of like a binary yes or no. Should you see it? Is it good? Fresh or rotten? And that's the percentage. It's not like this movie is 97%, like most of the critics have given it an A. So,
shut down Rotten Tomatoes. They gave the Justice League a bad review.
All these critics and their bias against DC, all these Marvel shills, big Disney filling the pockets of beating a dead horse with their Disney filthy mouse money.
I was say we're really loaded. That's why we both still have basic microphones.
That's why I haven't switched from this USB microphone that I bought in like 2013.
So yeah, let's talk spoilers, and we kind of talked a little bit about how we're gonna frame this one. So we're gonna start small scale and kind of like discuss the movie and how we had certain moments that felt about it to us, and we're gonna get bigger and grander until we do come back to a conversation about death on our Deathcast. I promise it's coming. You'll just have to hold out till the end because it's a biggie. So yeah. What do you want to talk about first?
Well, if we want to start off with death, this is an incredibly nitpicky moment. But one of the things I want to do in this episode is try and dissect what it is about these movies that makes them paradoxically so high quality and yet so forgettable. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to come to an answer on that, but I think I have a good example of a moment that seems like it should be a big deal, that seems like it should be a big moment that sticks out in your mind.
A big name, even.
A big name, and yet the movie treats it with nothing, and if it weren't for the fact that I'm part of a death podcast, I probably wouldn't have remembered it all.
Especially because it was a returning character at that.
Yeah, exactly. Alec Baldwin, who is like the head honcho of the IMF.
What does that stand for, by the way?
Impossible Mission Force.
Excuse me?
I'm assuming that's a holdover from like the '60s show. That
okay, that makes sense then.
Yeah, that's like how in Metal Gear they insist on calling.
There it is, boys.
Characters.
Check off your bingo box.
It's relevant. It's a spy movie. But that's like how in Metal Gear they call Big Boss still after all these years, even though like that was just literally to indicate that he was the final boss and your commander in this shitty 8-bit game that didn't have a story. And now we're still calling him Big Boss in this like gritty drama where you're like kidnapping child soldiers and brutally murdering your enemies. So I'm guessing it's like that. But yes, fine, beating a dead horse bingo. Like, don't you worry, I'll bring in How I Hate Kids soon enough. But anyway, Alec Baldwin dies. And it's weird. It's a weird moment because they give it a little bit of attention, but I wasn't even sure that he was dead because he gets stabbed in the gut by Henry Cavill, I think. Mm-hmm. And for one, like a stab in the gut, if properly treated, probably won't kill you in real life. So
especially
I wasn't
not that quickly.
Yeah, I wasn't even sure that he was dead. I mean, and especially considering this is an action movie and the characters get like insane amounts of punishment. So I wasn't even sure that he was dead, and he gives Tom Cruise a little bit of like oh, you're a good man for putting yourself above the others, making sure that the one life gets saved in the mission. But then they just never talk about him again, which is super strange because he had a really prominent role in the last one. And it just led me to think about how there are side characters who have a decent amount of personality, like Simon Pegg, Ving Rhames, the agent lady. They all play notable roles. They're all pretty memorable in their own right. Henry Cavill and the blonde, like, White Widow lady, they both kind of stand out. But, like, Jeremy Renner was in the last one, Hawkeye, and he played a pretty prominent role, and he wasn't in this one, and I don't remember what happened to him. Did he die? Is he just not in this one? I literally don't remember. So the movies are in this weird space where, like, they have characters, and they can be fun, and they have interactions, but, it's like the movies don't give them enough space to really stick in your mind, whereas, like, I still can remember how, Darling, for example, died in Baby Driver. Spoilers for Baby Driver, I guess. But, yeah, the side characters they're both the greatest strength and something of a weakness. And I think it's really telling of how these movies are kind of old school in their approach in a way that we don't really see anymore, in that they're really star and actor driven. Like, these are Tom Cruise vehicles. And, you know, we're not really remembering Simon Pegg and Ving Rhames as Benji and Luther. Like, remembering them as Simon Pegg and Ving Rhames. And that's not something that we see that's super common anymore, just because it feels like nobody really cares about movie stars in the traditional sense. Like, they keep trying to make Scarlett Johansson happen, but nobody really cares when she's not playing Black Widow. And, like that's just one example off the top of my head.
Plus, she takes really weird roles that don't necessarily fit her.
That's also true. Like, pretty much, like, the last time I can remember, like, pretty much the only names that were opening movies were Jennifer Lawrence and Chris Pratt, and people are definitely sick of Jennifer Lawrence by now, and
I'm
Chris
done with
Pratt.
Chris Pratt.
No, I am too, and I think people are getting there. And so aside from that, it's like, has Robert Downey Jr. played anyone but Iron Man? Yes, but nobody cares. So yeah, the movies are weird, and I think they occupy this strange space in that, like, by focusing so much on the stars and not having, that is one of the benefits of, like, the franchise, in that War Machine, for example, Rhodey is, like, a memorable side character who's running through all these films, and it's a big deal when he gets, like, paralyzed in Civil War, except that it's not really a big deal because he's just back in the action. But like, I remember that, whereas I don't remember where the fuck Jeremy Renner went.
I mean, that's the question we've been asking for several years now, because he's not in Avengers either. But no, like, there's just... I would want to compare it to the Game of Thrones books, in that, like, there's not a whole lot of loyalty for the characters. And, like, you know, a character will be introduced just to die relatively quickly later, but usually it's with an impact. Like, there's something to be remembered by them, and, like, they're introduced, they have a character moment that's powerful or something, and then they die pretty unceremoniously and quickly, but, like, you feel that impact when they die. You're like, oh my god, this character is here and now they're not. What happened? But then you get characters like Alec Baldwin's character, where they don't really have any impact on the movie other than to be Alec Baldwin, and then they die, and it's like you could swipe the whole thing away and you wouldn't feel like you lost anything. You would just be down Alec Baldwin as a headliner for the movie. So it is a weird way that they treat their characters, both in life and in death. But, like, it's the deaths, I think, that really underscore why these movies are forgettable, because they are not, like, nothing in them really sticks, even deaths. Like, they're just they happen and you move on. So is part of that the level of violence, do you think,
that, like, in these movies, people kind of only get shot or stabbed. Because, like, when I think about other spy movies, and spy movies are all pretty similar. It's a pretty formulaic genre. And, regardless, though, there are some characters whose deaths, like, really, really stand out to me. Villains, heroes, otherwise. Like, probably my favorite two spy movies, both have deaths that are just, like, been an image in my head ever since I saw the movie. When, James Bond's love interest drowns in Casino Royale, and when, Harry is killed in Kingsman. And, in both of those cases, Harry just gets shot, but it's also after an extended, really bloody massacre in a church, and that movie in general just has really, like, over-the-top violence. And so, whereas in this one, there are a lot of set pieces, and in general in these movies there are a lot of set pieces, but it's not about how efficiently you're taking down mooks. It's about, Tom Cruise kind of scaling the building, or running across this dangerous thing, or diving into, that's one I actually remember from Rogue Nation. He dives into, like, this whirlpool and has to, like, hold his breath underwater. And I think that is what these movies are known for. That's the other thing that's kind of old school that they pride themselves on, that Tom Cruise does all the stunts. And where that's supposed to be kind of the draw, in that we have this movie star doing all these crazy things. And I think it's interesting because it seems like there's a reason that that's not much of a draw in general anymore, because of how advanced special effects and CGI have gotten, to the point where you can usually tell the difference between, like, CGI effect and a practical effect. But even so, even if it is a practical effect, like, the fact that there are stunt doubles is pretty seamless. And so I think it's an interesting dimension of how much outside context we should bring to a movie when we're evaluating it that doesn't really get talked about. Because usually when we think about that conversation, it's in the context of, like, one of the prominent people involved being, like, a bad person, or having done or said something shitty. But this is more of a traditional kind of death of the author thing, where would the action set piece be as impressive if we didn't know that was actually Tom Cruise hanging off that helicopter? If you don't have that kind of marketing context, would it matter to the ultimate sequence of it being exciting? And I would say yes, because the scenes are just well directed, but maybe, but would they be less so? Can't really say for sure.
To kind of just rope it back a little bit before you went on your tear about the idea of, does the pull of doing your own stunts really matter? I guess I just would like to clarify, what was your, like, central idea behind, like, the violence and how it equates to the death of the characters?
Oh, yes, thank you. Just in that, I feel like in a spy movie like this, there are a lot of people who die, and when you have a prominent character death, I feel like in spy movies, the most memorable ones have some sort of visual impact in addition to a distinct narrative impact. Whereas, in this movie, Alec Baldwin just kind of gets stabbed and gives a little speech, and you're not even sure whether he dies or not.
It wasn't even a little speech. That was like half a sentence.
Yeah. Here, in other movies, like, even a bit character can become memorable by virtue of their death. So, like, again, just for the level of violence, Kingsman is a really good example. That guy at the beginning, the one Kingsman agent, getting cut in half, or even to a lesser extent, another scene that jumps out is like Eggsy's dad at the very beginning, like jumping the grenade. And even I think like having a memorable location helps differentiate it, whereas a lot of the locations in this movie, they spend a lot of time running around like dark sort of sewers and catacombs, and that's where Alec Baldwin dies, and I think that's another thing that makes it kind of whiff, that there is no like memorable location. Like we don't see James Bond's love interest like drowning in an elevator shaft slowly filling with water. It's just dark, one stab, bleh.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess your central thesis of it is just like everything about these movies end up being kind of procedural and generic in that regard. Like all the deaths are, you just get stabbed, like there's nothing special about it. Like I feel like his death, even just really quick, could have been fixed by a, Henry Cavill dipped the dagger in poison type of thing, and now we know he's dead. Cool. Solve that problem.
Yeah, or like if the dagger, the movies aren't as over the top as something like Kingsman, but like there's still like some gadgets and some tech tomfoolery. So if you had like a special knife that came out of, that was like a hidden blade in an object, that could have also helped.
Or like spring-loaded or like clawed or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, what I think it really is that it reminds me, it's kind of like the movie version of Uncharted, in that Uncharted, the developers of those games have been on record as saying that like they kind of think of the set pieces first and then put the story around that. And that seems like, I wouldn't be surprised if that's how these movies are made, given again the focus on Tom Cruise and his stunts. Except in Uncharted, since it's a video game, like those moments of downtime are kind of meant to fade into the background because you're playing them. Whereas like then you get to, Nathan Drake climbing up the train, and that sticks with you because it's like a cutscene or the controls change and it's full of like quick time events and it's punctuated by this really cinematic stuff. Whereas here, it just ends up feeling more like character gets sort of thrown to the wayside a little bit, since the focus is so much on like the big moments.
But yeah, no, like everything just kind of becomes just such a flash in the pan. It happened, we're moving on, nothing matters. It was generic and boring, and you've already forgotten about it because now we're watching Tom Cruise do a Sonic run on a rooftop. So it just like, it definitely kind of makes everything a little bit more forgettable, especially because like even the big set pieces do end up being somehow kind of generic. There's nothing really to them that sets them apart from other movies doing the same thing now. Like I imagine when Mission Impossible movies started, like you would not have imagined somebody doing like a climbing up the Burj Khalifa or whatnot. And so it's, for a while they were interesting and wild, and now they feel kind of not necessarily as inspired and memorable as they might have once felt. I'm going to take a minute here though, because I feel like we've covered this at this point. So yeah. I want to take a minute and jump off and talk about something positive about the movie, because as we said, like, there's nothing really wrong with this movie, and there's a lot of really good about it. And I want to just kind of really quick talk about the sound design here, because they did just a wonderful job at knowing how to play with the sound. I remember when we watched Atomic Blonde, actually was the last time I really remembered this, where they didn't actually have any like background music, any background noises in a fist fight, and like you could feel them getting exhausted and you could hear the hits, and it was visceral and rough. And like the first big fist fight in this movie, they do the exact same thing, and it's so good, especially because like outside you've got some EDM playing, and like that's all out there, and they could have easily just piped that through like the wumpa 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 boom ooh type of thing. That was terrible, and I'm sorry. But in this case, no, it's absolutely silent except for them just beating the shit out of each other, and it's wonderful. And like they're not afraid. The movie isn't afraid to use silence, which I just have to give it a lot of props for, because I do feel like a lot of more modern movies are kind of afraid to just be like, all right, look, we're not going to have any noise here. You know, we're just going to let what happens speak for itself, or we're going to mute it, or whatever they want to do with it. So, like, I was really impressed and surprised that this movie did it a couple times and just really emphasized what was happening on screen through the use of its silence, as opposed to making sure that there was something bumping and driving in the soundtrack to get you to, like, pay attention and notice. It was super effective in those quiet moments.
Yeah, that's another thing that makes the movie feel kind of old school to me, now that you mention it, and that modern action movies are all sound and fury signifying nothing. There's always some fucking sound going, there's always some, like, terrible CGI thing going on and making the action bloated, whereas here, you just get a good old-fashioned, well-choreographed punch-up in a bathroom, and you really let the sounds and, like, you know, the background noise speak for itself and make it genuinely exciting, as opposed to Jurassic World, where you're laughing at Chris Pratt, like, kick people across the room.
As you get, like, the Hans Zimmer track playing in the background, and the Inception blah is happening the entire time. And...
Oh God. I mean, like, you compare this, you know, you want to talk about a fist fight, compare this to the fight between Batman and Superman in the title film Batman vs. Superman. Like, that whole fight is just constant CGI particle effects, fucking Hans Zimmer blowing and lightning and noise, and it's just a headache. Whereas this is clean, it's crisp, glorious looking white bathroom, and then there is a nice punctuation of some violence to make it stand out a little bit more when finger quotes John Lark is killed, because you get a nice big old blood splatter across the bathroom floor that makes an impression.
You get the literal punctuation of the sound of a gun and the blood splatter, and it's great. It pays off.
The tension releases as his gray matter oozes onto the floor.
That was beautiful poetry. Just a sentence that you uttered.
That will be cut out of context to haunt me for the rest of my life, I think.
Oh no. So, all right. Let's talk about the other thing that I definitely wanted to talk about here is this is kind of like the second film in as many weeks, actually, where I've watched the trailer, had a solid idea on what I thought the movie was going to be, and then had my expectations upended. Last week we watched Sorry to Bother You, and the trailer doesn't do the movie justice. I'm not going to say literally anything else about it because you need to go watch it. It's a fucking great movie. This movie, however, the trailer does a wonderful job of misleading you. Like, it's not even so much like that you feel like you already know the plot, as much as like it intentionally makes you think you do. And like everything, or most things in the trailer happen within like the first act of the movie. So like everything kind of goes, oh, okay, this isn't really what's happening. This isn't how it seems. Because like for a little bit there, you know, the trailer makes it seem like he goes rogue pretty quickly and does his own thing right away. And so I'm like, all right, I guess, you know, I know it's going to happen. I kept waiting for that to happen. And like they say the line where they're like, you're rogue and, you know, you've been betrayed by your government so many times. How could you not go off on your own or whatever? And I'm like, all right, so I think that's going to happen. And then they say it in the movie and it's not at all. Like, it's a totally different context. The rug is ripped out from under you and it is wonderful. It is so nice to go into this movie with these expectations and for them to just be like, just kidding. We played you like a motherfucker and you know it. So I have to really give the movie praise and like whoever did the trailer cuts and everything like that, because they definitely picked the juicy bits, but they put them in a very different order from what you were expecting it to actually be.
Yeah, this movie... I just keep coming back to the fact that this movie feels dated in a good way, because now, but if you watched a trailer, in a lot of cases, you know the entire movie. And this movie, for its trailer, front loads that stuff and makes you... It kind of reminds me, the last time I felt this way was the Iron Man 3 trailer, actually, because I remember that came out around the same time that The Dark Knight Rises did, and the trailer was cut and ordered in a way to make it seem like it was this heavy, thing full of gravitas and, like, the fall of Iron Man and being all the new dark and edgy one. But then, movie played around with that when we finally got to it, and that was, like, the last time... Actually, I lie, because the last time I was surprised by a trailer after seeing the movie was Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, where I thought the whole movie was going to be the stupid island blowing up, and thankfully that it wasn't. But I can't exactly give it praise for that, for being not as stupid as I thought it was going to be in the trailer.
The fact that the Jurassic World fucking had, like, 3 big-ass set pieces is absurd, and, like... is its own thing.
Yeah, I can't give it credit for that in the same way that I could give this credit.
Yeah, it's a totally different beast.
Yeah.
Let's wrap this all up with a nice little bow. We've had our initial discussion on the death of Alec Baldwin, and now let's tie it back into the end, where we discuss death and tension, and how this movie manages to maintain tension in a world where everything is sequels and extended universes and shared universes and all that good stuff. Because if you have listened to the podcast before, I'm sure you've heard us talk about how a lot of superhero movies, we don't really have that tension anymore. Looking at you, Infinity War, where, like, you're not really concerned about people dying because, you know, they'll come back or not actually die in this moment or whatever. Like, there's just so many ways for them to not die because you have, like, 3 contracts ahead and you're like, all right, I already know that Bucky Barnes is signed on to do 6 more movies. But, like, Mission Impossible, comes out, like, so infrequently. Like, this movie, there's 5 of them and it's been running since 1996. So, like, you don't actually know if there's going to be another.
I'm shocked that Rogue Nation came out in 2015. It feels like it came out much, like, sooner than that.
Really, I was going to say, it feels like it came out a long time ago.
Oh, really? See, I don't know. It felt more recent to me. But, yeah, anyway, I guess that's neither here nor there. Continue.
Yeah. But, like, this movie manages to maintain its tension, I think, in a number of ways. I think number one is that, as we kind of discussed with Alec Baldwin, is it creates characters but also doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of loyalty to them. Like, the cast has been rotating the entire time. Tom Cruise and Ving Rhames are the only 2 people that have been in every movie. Simon Pegg has been in 4 of the 6. So, like, there's some characters that have been around for a while, but, like, I could totally see them killing Simon Pegg in one of these movies just because they needed the change or something like that. I don't think that they have that loyalty to him, which is, you know, it's good because it keeps that tension up, because they do just kill people that have been in multiple movies.
And they do introduce the possibility with Luther at the beginning, where that's sort of the central moral question, like Tom Cruise going undercover and whether or not he's willing to sacrifice individuals for the greater good. And they do that fake out with Luther, but it feels close enough, and because, like, there are some conspicuous absences from characters that were in previous movies that, like, you believe that they might do it.
Yeah, it's great for tension. You know, like, there's actual questions of, like, oh, did he actually die? Should I be concerned for this character? You're not like, whatever, he's fine, he's gonna get up in 3 minutes anyway.
Yeah, like I think the best example in the movie is when Ilsa and Simon Pegg, Benji, are looking for the second bomb, and they're alone and get kind of separated with the big bad. And that scene is really tense because it feels realistic for either of them to die. And there's a nice extended sequence where Simon Pegg is getting like strung up by a noose, and you're not sure.
It's dark too.
It's pretty brutal. Like that's another moment that sticks out more so. And like she kind of hands him the glass, and like he has to try and like cut away, and he just barely makes it in time. And it's all very well staged because those are two characters that could feasibly die. Now, Tom Cruise himself obviously has a lot more plot armor because there's with that model of it being star driven, there's basically zero reason to do one of these movies without him. And however, I think that even the scenes involving him are still tense. And sorry, I know I'm kind of hijacking your point here.
Oh, you're good. You're good. Roll with it.
Yeah. But there was just one thing I wanted to mention that I think a key thing that Tom Cruise has that an action hero needs in order to not seem like he's completely invincible, and in order to make action scenes still somewhat tense, is vulnerability. And we see it quite a few times in this film, where like he'll miss a jump from building to building and like smack his leg, and he has to kind of like limp along as he keeps going. The most memorable moment of the final helicopter chase, in addition again to just presenting a fun, tense problem of like, okay, we need the detonator in order to stop these nukes. Now, he's in a separate helicopter. How the fuck am I going to get over there? It's a nice like video game like puzzle. These movies kind of feel like big video games in a way. And not that, that's usually something that is used against movies as a criticism, but I am using that in like the positive sense, as in what's fun about video games. But the most memorable part of that sequence when he is trying to get on to the first helicopter is that he slips and falls and like barely catches himself. Whereas compare that to like Chris Pratt's character in fucking Jurassic World, where he's just jumping around like a commando and can do perfect like backflips every time. And
can kick dinosaurs through fucking roofs and shit.
Yeah, and there's never a doubt in your mind. It's like, even though by the standards of the genre, like, we know that Indiana Jones, we know that John McClane, we know that Ethan Hunt are all going to make it to the end and succeed, the fact that all of those characters have some sort of vulnerability, some sort of moment where they fuck up, even if it is just physical, allows you to still get kind of a raw feeling of tension, whereas in maybe something like a superhero movie, the fact that the characters are so powerful and the action is so weightless in comparison, maybe Iron Man does get punched by Thanos, but we're not really that worried about him, even like in the middle of the actual act of fighting, just because he's got these nanobots and they're just gonna fucking heal him right up. And that's an example where that's an interesting example, just because like Infinity War, there was that implicit threat of death in it, to a point. But like until that moment where he actually does get some good damage in, like he still feels like the same like fighting game character that everyone else does in the Marvel movies.
Yeah, no, I think like the fact that Ethan Hunt can fail and has, like, you were implying, like, when he dropped off the helicopter, but, like, go even back a little bit before that, he missed the first helicopter. Like, he just couldn't get on it in time. Like, that is just a failure on his part. But, like, even beyond that, you still have these failures, these moments where he doesn't do things exactly right, actually creates moments where you think, oh, he could die this time. He could fail in what he's trying to do. Especially because, as I said, we don't have, like, a schedule, like, he's signed on for 6 more of these movies and whatnot. And Tom Cruise, he's 56. He might not make another one. They might be like, all right, hey, this is the end of Tom Cruise. We're just going to kill him at the end of this one. it wouldn't be a surprise. Like, you know, he succeeds in the end, but he dies in doing so. I was, honest to God, thinking that, hey, maybe he gets the detonator code thing out, but dies anyway, because the helicopters crash or something. Like, the fact they walked out of those helicopters was absurd, but also, you know, whatever.
But it's an action movie, and that's a really good point. In maybe one of the benefits of having a star-driven character so much is that when the actor is done, the character is done. Then, or at least you know, in a perfect world. Whereas, I mean, and you know, that's kind of like one end of the spectrum versus another. Because on the other end of the spectrum, you have like James Bond. Any given incarnation of James Bond could die, and they could still make more because they'll just make another James Bond. Whereas with this, when Tom Cruise decides he's done, it's done. There's no reason to make another because it's so driven around his personality. Whereas, you know, go back to Iron Man, you can put someone else in the suit.
You could put Rhodey in the suit, and you'd have the exact same Iron Man.
Yeah, you could put Rhodey in the suit, and it would still... You wouldn't have Robert Downey Jr. exactly, but he'd still fly around, he'd still do the tech thing. It would still be Iron Man. You could still have someone filling that role. So, yeah. Well, good point, Sean. Well made. Clap, clap.
Golf clap for myself. Thank you, Sean. Thank you. But yeah, I think that's really just like the big thing that I just have to give this movie props for is like it keeps the threat of death alive throughout the entire thing. It's never like, oh, you know, we're all going to be fine. Everyone's going to walk out of here alive, because I don't know that. Like, people just die in these movies sometimes. And it's great to go into an action movie and still have that tension as I'm watching it of, oh, will this character die? Will they live? Who's going to die? Could Ethan even fail this time? Like, the question of will the hero fail is so removed from a lot of blockbusters recently that it's kind of nice to have that again. Especially because, like, the movie opens up with the idea that he did fail. Like, straight up, the movie begins with him failing to get the plutonium, and then fake showing us that he failed, and the three holy centers of the world were blown up.
I actually was thinking about that, and I don't know if... see, because the best example that I have is so mega spoilery, even to you, that I don't know if I can safely bring it up. But basically, I think the fake out was good. I liked that scene. But after they had faked us out once, I wasn't afraid that he was going to fail again, basically. I don't know. It had kind of the opposite effect on me.
See, I wasn't necessarily afraid that he was going to fail in the exact same way, but it raised the idea that he was going to fail in, like, he could die while succeeding type of thing. Not so much he's going to fail and, you know, the nukes are going to go off.
That I agree with, and I think that's the thing about this whole tension argument, is that it's not it gets presented so often as an all or nothing thing, but there are degrees, there are gradients. And realizing where your movie needs to be on the spectrum, like, do you need your audience to be afraid that the nukes are going to go off? No, you don't. As long as you have the realistic possibility that there will be some sort of consequence to someone that we care about, that's your tension. And this movie does that pretty well.
Yeah, it threads the needle really nicely and, you know, becomes a pretty solid movie all in all.
Yes, a worthy use of 2.5 hours, which is more than I could say for a lot of fucking blockbusters.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. You could go watch Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom and, you know, feel bad about yourself. So, you know, you good to wrap it here?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Cool. We're going to wrap it on a positive note. Look at that. We did it. Everything's good this time.
Bring out the fucking party poppers, everyone. We did it. We didn't end with the heat death of the universe for once.
Hell yeah. Death of capitalism, not this time, boys. Heat death of the universe? No, thank you. Why this character should have died even though they're a fan favorite and like 10? Nope. We're talking about good stuff. That's right. So yeah, I've been Sean McKinda, and I've been remarkably positive. You can follow me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda, or you can check out my website, isortof.com. I've got reviews, some weird YouTube stuff I've done. My Twitch page is up there. Go do that. We've been playing a lot of Jackbox on Sundays, so if you're ever just looking for something to do, you should come hang out with us and play Jackbox.
And I'm Jackson Keller. You can find me over on Twitter at JacksonJKeller. Although I have deleted the Twitter app from my phone, I still check in to see if people are giving me comments about the show or anything. So don't hesitate to drop by and talk to me, at me about something.
And there's number 3.
Oh no, I'm just really falling into my fucking tropes today.
And so you've Beetlejuiced it so hard. That's the 3rd time it's gonna happen.
Oh no. Well, can't wait for the fucking floodgates to be open on that one.
If you want to keep up to date with the podcast, the news, the happenings, the things that we might be talking about, you can follow the podcast itself at BADH_cast on Twitter. As I said, it just kind of keeps us updated with what's going on in case there's like some sort of episode that we need to skip or something changes or anything like that. You can check that out there. As always, I'd like to thank Lords of the Highway for the use of our theme song. It is Suicide, alternate take off the album High Octane, Low Expectations. They're great. They're on Spotify. Go check them out. Also, thanks to 25yearslattersite.com for hosting our stuff. We really appreciate you guys. They've got a bunch of really cool stuff featuring like David Lynch and cult movies and cult TV shows and everything like that. It's great. Go check them out. A bunch of awesome writers. Next week, we're going to be talking about The Darkest Minds. We're falling back into a young adult movie book type thing going on. It's supposed to be pretty good from the people who have read the book. I don't really know. I don't really know much about it, so I guess we're going to find out. Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go